Russia and Ukraine share a long and complex history, bound by centuries of cultural, linguistic, and religious ties. Their relationship has also been marked by conflict and mistrust. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 brought a new chapter. Tensions rose as Ukraine sought closer ties with NATO and the EU. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 and conflict in eastern Ukraine are key events. These events have plunged relations to their lowest point in decades. To understand the current crisis in Ukraine, it is essential to examine the leadership style of Vladimir Putin. Putin, a former KGB officer, has ruled Russia with an iron fist for over 2 decades. His leadership is characterized by a deep-seated suspicion of the West, a desire to restore Russia to its former glory, and a willingness to use force to achieve his objectives. Putin's decision-making process is highly centralized, with a small circle of trusted advisors wielding significant influence. This concentration of power has stifled dissent within the Russian government and has made it difficult for alternative viewpoints to be heard. Critics argue that this lack of transparency and accountability has contributed to a climate of impunity within the Russian elite. Moreover, Putin's leadership has been marked by a crackdown on independent media, civil society organizations, and political opposition. This systematic suppression of dissent has created an environment of fear and intimidation, making it difficult for ordinary Russians to challenge the official narrative on Ukraine. Some propose Ukraine adopt neutrality to resolve the conflict, foregoing its aspirations to join NATO or the EU. This idea is fraught with risks and unlikely to provide a lasting solution. Ukraine has experienced the pitfalls of neutrality before. The 1994 Budapest Memorandum's security guarantees proved worthless when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. Imposing neutrality rewards Russia's aggression. It sends a dangerous message to other states considering aligning with the West. Neutrality won't address Ukraine's security concerns as long as Russia remains aggressive. To fully comprehend the motivations behind Russia's actions in Ukraine, it is necessary to delve into Putin's worldview and his broader strategic objectives. Putin has repeatedly lamented the collapse of the Soviet Union, describing it as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. This statement reveals a deep-seated nostalgia for the days when Russia was a global superpower, dictating terms to its neighbors and projecting its power far beyond its borders. The invasion of Ukraine can be seen as an attempt to reverse this perceived historical injustice and to reassert Russia's dominance in its near abroad. By seizing control of Ukraine, Putin aims to restore Russia's sphere of influence in Eastern Europe and to prevent the expansion of NATO and the European Union eastward. Furthermore, Putin's actions in Ukraine are driven by a desire to maintain his grip on power within Russia. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 was met with widespread popular support in Russia, boosting Putin's approval ratings and solidifying his hold on power. The current conflict can be seen as an attempt to tap into this wellspring of nationalist sentiment and to distract from domestic problems such as corruption, economic stagnation, and political repression. Section 5. The West responds. International reactions and geopolitical consequences. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been met with widespread international condemnation. The United States, the European Union, and their allies have imposed unprecedented sanctions on Russia, targeting its financial institutions, energy sector, and oligarchs. These sanctions are designed to cripple the Russian economy and to pressure Putin to change course. In addition to sanctions, Western countries have provided Ukraine with billions of dollars in military aid, including weapons systems, intelligence sharing, and training. This support is crucial for Ukraine's ability to defend itself against Russian aggression. The invasion of Ukraine has also had profound geopolitical consequences. It has shattered the post-Cold War security order in Europe, leading to a renewed focus on defense spending and military preparedness among NATO members. The conflict has also highlighted the importance of transatlantic unity in the face of Russian aggression. Section 6. The Specter of Escalation Risks and Potential Flashpoints. As the conflict in Ukraine grinds on, there is a growing risk of escalation, with potentially catastrophic consequences. One major concern is the possibility of a direct military confrontation between Russia and NATO. While NATO has ruled out sending troops into Ukraine, the alliance has bolstered its military presence in Eastern Europe to deter further Russian aggression. Another flashpoint is the potential use of chemical or biological weapons. Russia has a history of using such weapons in Syria, and there are concerns that it could resort to similar tactics in Ukraine. The use of such weapons would cross a red line and could trigger a more forceful response from the West. The conflict in Ukraine has also raised the specter of nuclear war. Russia possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal, and Putin has repeatedly made veiled threats about using nuclear weapons if Russia's security is threatened. While the likelihood of nuclear war remains low, the risks should not be underestimated. Section 7. A question of leadership, Putin's calculus and the future of the conflict. The future trajectory of the conflict in Ukraine will depend in large part on the calculations of Vladimir Putin. Putin is facing mounting pressure both domestically and internationally. The sanctions imposed by the West are having a significant impact on the Russian economy, and there are growing signs of discontent within Russia over the war in Ukraine. However, Putin has shown no willingness to back down. He appears to believe that he can weather the storm of sanctions and that he can achieve his objectives in Ukraine through military force. This intransigence makes a negotiated settlement unlikely in the near term. The longer the conflict drags on, the greater the risk of miscalculation and escalation. It is therefore imperative that the international community continues to pressure Putin to end the war and to seek a diplomatic solution. Section 8. The fog of war, truth and propaganda in the information age. The conflict in Ukraine is not only a battle for territory, but also a battle for hearts and minds. Both Russia and Ukraine are engaged in sophisticated information warfare campaigns, seeking to shape the narrative of the conflict in their favor. Russia has a long history of propaganda and disinformation, and it has deployed these tools effectively in Ukraine. The Kremlin has sought to portray the invasion as a special military operation aimed at denazifying and demilitarizing Ukraine. This narrative has been amplified by Russian state-controlled media, which has spread false and misleading information about the conflict. Ukraine, for its part, has been effective in using social media to counter Russian propaganda and to garner international support. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has emerged as a powerful voice for his country, using social media to rally his people and to appeal for international assistance. Section 9. The human cost, the tragedy of war in Ukraine. The conflict in Ukraine has had a devastating impact on the lives of millions of people. Thousands of civilians have been killed, and millions more have been displaced from their homes. The war has also had a profound psychological impact on the Ukrainian people, who are living with the constant threat of violence and uncertainty. The humanitarian crisis in Ukraine is likely to worsen in the coming months as the fighting continues. The United Nations estimates that over 12 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, including food, water, shelter, and medical care. The international community must step up its efforts to provide aid to those affected by the conflict. Section 10. Beyond the battlefield. The long road to peace and reconciliation. Even if the fighting in Ukraine were to end tomorrow, the road to peace and reconciliation would be long and arduous. The conflict has left deep scars on both Ukrainian and Russian society, and it will take years, if not decades, to heal these wounds. One of the most challenging tasks will be to address the issue of accountability for war crimes. There have been credible reports of atrocities committed by both sides, and it is essential that those responsible are held accountable. This will require a concerted effort from the international community, including the establishment of an independent mechanism to investigate and prosecute war crimes. Another key challenge will be to rebuild Ukraine's shattered economy and infrastructure. The World Bank estimates that the Ukrainian economy will contract by 45.1% in 2022. Rebuilding Ukraine will require a massive infusion of international aid and investment. Section 11. A world watching Ukraine and the future of global security. The conflict in Ukraine has profound implications for the future of global security. It has demonstrated the fragility of the rules-based international order and the willingness of authoritarian leaders to use military force to achieve their objectives. The invasion of Ukraine has also highlighted the importance of alliances and the need for collective security. NATO has emerged from the crisis stronger and more united, but the alliance must adapt to the changing security environment and develop new strategies to deter future aggression. The conflict in Ukraine is a tragedy for all involved. It is a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the urgent need for peace. The international community must work together to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict and to build a more secure and stable world.